Hey friends, I'm really excited to share these American Revolutionary stories with you for fourth graders specifically. It's a little bit of a broader range, obviously, as all books are, but some of these are a little bit thicker for like more advanced readers or if you want to read them out loud, and some of them are a little smaller for less advanced readers and if they want to have like a quick, easy win and also just kind of like a more condensed story about one section. The way that I teach history in my homeschool is through kind of like a history unit study, and I use these books to do it. So this is a really good resource if you're looking to build an American Revolutionary unit study for your homeschool. I recommend watching the whole video so you can see every single book I recommend and then see which ones like work for you that you may want to piece together your own unit study or whatever that looks like for you. I'll share a little bit about each book so you kind of know what it's about, and we should be all set. Let's get into it. Tremain, probably the most popular book that I'm going to mention, but I can't give a list about books about the Revolution without including Tremain. If you don't know, he is a silversmith, an apprentice to a silversmith, and during the start of the Revolutionary War. And as he's working as an apprentice, he gets injured. I'm picturing the movie so clearly. I read the book a few years ago and then we watched the movie afterward. The book is better, spoiler, but he becomes injured and then he ends up joining the American Revolution. He ends up meeting some of the players in the American Revolution like Paul Revere, Samuel Adams, John Hancock, these people. And so it kind of is cool because it's including their story. Obviously it's historical fiction, but it is like a very good story, you know, really incorporating historical figures of the time and also kind of giving a little bit of history of silversmithing and like what can go wrong. I thought that was kind of like interesting personally. I'm also gonna put this list into a spreadsheet for you so you could like take it to the library and just like, yes, check, 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 so that you have something easy to grab. And also I'll link them on my Amazon page so that you can find them that way as well. So all of that will be in the description. The next one is Toliver's Secret. It's about a little girl who ends up having to help her grandfather as he is spying for the American side. She has a small mission and she just needs to do one little thing, which was get the bread from one side of the river to the other and hand it off to the right person. But things go wrong and she ends up having to she ends up getting lost in the woods and has to make her way back. Meanwhile, she's pretending to be a boy because it would have been too suspicious to send a little girl across the river with the soldiers at this time. So Ellen is in disguise and trying to spy for the Americans and get the note that she is trying to smuggle to the other side. Another good story, just simple, but also painting that picture of like how they did things, how they fought essentially. This one's a little shorter than Tremain, but still a good read aloud if your child's not quite up for reading quite as many pages. Good choice. The next one I'm just gonna put on the screen. It's about Molly Pitcher. Now, we had Molly Pitcher when I was a child and I loved the story. I probably read it multiple times and it was just a really, really sweet story about a girl who ends up helping fight in the war. And obviously at that time she was not allowed to fight. And so she did her part anyway. It's based on a true story. And I don't even know if I knew that at the time when I read it, but it's about Molly and she's just, you know, milking the cows, living her life, doing the things that you did in the 1770s in America. Very simple. She started out just like helping by bringing water to the soldiers or if they would come onto their property, like giving them food, but definitely a really sweet story. And if you're looking for a one that is about a girl, that's a good choice. I have a couple that the main characters are boys and a couple that the main characters are girls. So that one's a girl main character story, and so was Toliver's Secret. The next one's called Phoebe the Spy. Phoebe is the daughter of this man. He hears that there's a plot to kill George Washington and he asks his daughter to spy for him. She's only 13 at the time, so she's so young, but she goes and lives in George Washington's house, the house he's staying in Boston at the time. And she's staying there and she's like listening and observing. It's really suspenseful. Actually, it was like, oh, like what's gonna happen? Trying to figure out who the bad guy is because you know that one of the people close to George Washington is gonna be the one to attempt the assassination, but you don't know who it's gonna be. So this was a fun short story too. You could definitely read this like in one sitting, but it's also a good choice if you're having your child read and they don't want to read a big book yet. This is a really good option. if you were there when they signed the Constitution, is like the story is still written for kids, but it's definitely a little bit more fact-based in that it's talking about like where did the delegates stay when they came, talking about they could only meet when this many people had arrived to discuss it. In the first few days there was really bad roads, so were people going to make it? Like the Constitution almost wasn't written because nobody was going to show up or the right people weren't showing up. So things like that all is discussed in this book. So I think this is a really good, not textbook, but textbooky story, because it's definitely going over some more of the details of how the Constitution came about specifically. Meet George Washington is just a little bit more of a deeper dive into George Washington himself from his early years to the end of his life. So I liked this, again, very fast read for an adult. It might take, my fourth grader a little bit more time to get through it, but I could read it pretty fast. This is a good choice if you're looking for a little bit more about George Washington specifically. And then What Happened, Paul Revere. Now, I liked the story mostly not for the Paul Revere rides part, because we've all heard that a million times, but actually because it talks a little bit more about his story and other things he was doing before and after the war. So it's not just this one scene. That's not what the book's about. It's actually just about Paul Revere, and has about the same information as the one about George Washington I just showed you. It just talks about how many kids he had. He was married more than once, all of that. This man had a lot of kids, so that was an interesting fact I learned when I reread this story. But it does still talk about Paul Revere and his ride and why he was the one that was doing the riding, and also other things that happened that were interesting for that night, because so many things have to come into play. It just is wild to me sometimes how many moving pieces there are in one specific storyline. Okay, stay tuned, because I'm still getting to my favorite book that's down here, but these ones are smaller, and I realize that, but also they're still really good. And again, I like larger books, smaller books, ones that like zoom in on one thing, ones that pull back and show a bigger picture. I like all the things. So Winter at Valley Forge, it takes you just through the Winter at Valley Forge. It's just talking about that one specific. It's told almost like it's a journal. It was told in the first person, and it's Monday, December 22nd, 1777. It's still bitter and cold. George Washington says our most urgent need is shelter. So it's from one guy's perspective, and he's talking about all the things that were going wrong, all the people that were not surviving the winter, and it's very gentle. Definitely a younger child could listen to the story or read the story. A second grader could probably read this and get a pretty good idea of what was going on, but it's not so intense. And I thought it was interesting because one of the other books I read briefly mentions the Winter at Valley Forge, and oh yeah, like they weren't getting paid or something, some like small piece of it. I'm like, they weren't getting paid, they had no food, and they were losing limbs because of frostbite. So this, like, why was that one sentence? Like, it just felt too small, and I was kind of peeved by that. The Landmark History of American People, if you like more textbook, more like fact-based, like very concise, there's about 40 pages in this book that are specifically about the American Revolution and like why they think England lost and things like that. Okay, so from about chapter 9, it says the British take a collision course, and it's specifically talking about when they start overtaxing, and then there's the Boston Tea Party, then there's a chapter called America Declares War, and then New States or New Nations, so there's talk about that. That was also mentioned in the Constitution book, where they're talking about how some of the founders, they wanted each state to be its own country, and then other founders wanted it to be one nation. And so that was also talked about in this book, and it's talked about in the Constitution book very briefly, talked about more in this book. This is a good one. Obviously not the whole thing is about the American Revolution, but it's still like a really good, meaty talk about the American Revolution. The Light and the Glory is also a story about the start of America, but it's through a faith-based lens. So it's very much a Christian perspective of the start of America. Again, not the whole thing's about the revolution, obviously, but a big chunk of it is just because that was like a big chunk of our history was breaking free. So that's this one. Carry On Mr. Bowditch is not about the American Revolution, but it's set during that same time frame. And like I said before, I like to have a broad perspective. This book starts in the middle, 4 years into the Revolutionary War. It's not about the war, but I still think it can give that broader perspective that I talked about. And then it's about Nathaniel Bowditch. He's in Salem, Massachusetts, He's pulled out of school at a very young age because so many things go wrong, as is often the case in these stories. Things go wrong and they have to kind of forge a new path. So things go wrong and he teaches himself advanced mathematics. If you like math and navigation and things of that nature, you'd probably really enjoy this book. And again, it's set during the American Revolution and then years after, because it follows his story for a long time. So that's Nathaniel Bowditch. And then last but not least, it's probably actually my top 3 books that I've ever read for Sunlight. I've read hundreds, and out of the hundreds, this is still like top 3. I get to read it again this year because it's in Core H, and that's what I'm doing with my daughter, 8th grade, Core H, 8th grade. And yes, so drum roll please. The Sherwood Ring. Part historical fiction, part ghost story. This one is so fun. So a more modern teenager becomes an orphan and she has to go live with her uncle on this estate. And it's a big house, think Chronicles of Narnia, when they have to go into the country and they find the wardrobe. It's kind of like that, except it's different, obviously. She comes to this big estate, she's very lonely, and she starts talking and meeting the ghosts in the house, which are her ancestors. The ancestor storyline is during the Revolutionary War, and in the story they play a big role in the war and the winning and losing sides, obviously. It's got mystery, romance, and it's a great story. I would say 100% such a fun read for a 4th grader. Like I said, I'm reading it to my 8th grader, but when I read it last time, my younger kids also listened because it was just so good. And my oldest son, when I was reading it to him, was laughing out loud. When you're reading to your kids and they're laughing, it brings the other kids, you know what I mean? If you like your history to be interesting, entertaining, and served with a little bit of magic, then this is a great choice. Next week, I'm going to be talking about how I teach history. It's kind of like a unit study, but with a little bit of a twist. So stay tuned for that. If you're watching this past when this video is published, I'm going to link it up here, somewhere here, so that you can easily find it, because I want everyone to be able to teach history in a way that's fun. You can remember it and you'll be able to talk about it for years and years to come because it just made such a wonderful, positive, lasting impression. I hope this video is helpful, and I'll see you guys again really soon.